repeat what Alan was talking about. Making predictions is difficult, especially about the future. So be ready to pepper him with questions, and let's have a lively discussion after he's done. So to acknowledge, oh, okay, go ahead.
Hi, and welcome to Ariane. We're so glad to have you here tonight. Ariane is an energy, engineering, procurement, and construction management company. We're about 6 years old and what else? 350 people. So this is our campus here in Houston. And I want to introduce you to our VP of downstream. This is Arnie Salinas.
Thanks, Betty. Hey, thanks everyone for coming out. Truly appreciate it. We had a great event. You know, one thing about Arion is we focus on people, performance, and innovation, and we could not have done this today without these people right here. So they deserve a big round of applause. Our corporate services team, thank you. But also, Patty, great turnout. That's what I heard. Great feedback from everyone. So truly appreciate y'all giving us this opportunity to get together, come here and share more industry knowledge. Thank you.
So next we're going to go into the awards and recognition. Gary, there you go. Okay. So the first one is the past chair. Um, so last year, Bill did an amazing job herding cats and organizing successful set of events. Maybe we can give him a big round of applause. So he's not gone. He's going to be the past chair, but has given me the task of filling his big shoes. So all kidding aside, Bill has been a joy to work with. He is highly dependable, very enthusiastic, passionate about the job at hand. He is currently looking for advancing his career and is looking for opportunities. So if you have any leads or opportunities, the next one is our YP chair, Dan. He probably is not over here with us today, um, but he organized a lot of fun events for the YP folks. Um, the next one is Dr. Harsh Agarwal. He's the Young Chemical Engineer of the year. And oh, okay. um, so he would be formally recognized at the Houston Engineers Week in February. So plan to attend. We are sponsoring, and there are raffle tickets. So there are some QR codes over here. Would strongly recommend uh, to basically buy the raffle tickets, and uh, I think the price is very nice. I
It's $10
yeah,
and it's for a season pass for the rodeo. All 20
yeah,
shows.
and
Sounds good to me.
$250 or something like that.
Oh,
Yeah,
you don't have to anymore.
you,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm even gonna buy a ticket. I'm not a young engineer
Um, you want to talk about uh, the
anymore.
nominations?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be opening up the floor for nominations shortly. Um, applied paper award, applied fundamental paper award. I haven't received confirmation, but there's some great folks at Shell who do the who go through all these papers that have been submitted and make the decisions on that. Oh yeah, and best practice too, because yeah, Julie, you won that last year. So yes, excellent. So there's special recognition if you're an STS member, but you actually have to be an STS member to nominate or to be a lead on the paper. So I encourage you to become a member. So and get your co-authors to be members as well. That's what we really want. We're also looking for nominations on Outstanding Young Professional Award, and yeah, 35 or 40 is
35 and under.
yeah, it's supposed to be 35 and under. Distinguished Service Award. So if you know someone who's put special effort into making this organization great, please bring their name forward. And Special Service Awards, which can go to anyone who really is helping us out. So send the names to me. I think on our website. I think we're still going to be updating. Oh, there it is. So this is how you can get in touch with me. And this will be posted on our site as well. Bring forth the nominations. I think University of Houston has been pretty dominant in the awards category. So like if you're a Rice person or Texas A&M, you may want to try to catch up a little bit. But I'm not gonna. I show no bias. By the way, I don't even get a vote on the best paper. So we've got a good committee put together for that. So and that's it for me.
So what I want to do is quickly go over some of the things that we're planning for the first quarter. Um, One of the things that we are planning is to work with the Energy Transition Institute at University of Houston, and they have a set of webinar series is starting from January 14th, every 2 weeks. Essentially, for those who attend, STS would be providing PDH credits. Um, there's another one which is Future Cities. This is more of a K through 12 engagement. I have participated in judging, and it's a lot of fun to go and see sixth graders through eighth graders make presentations about what the future cities may look like. And there are a lot of people over here. Maybe we may end up retiring over there one day. Uh, so talk to my colleague Moise Hussain, who is in charge of organizing it, or contact me and I can provide you the details. Or Matt is also taking the lead on it. Um, PE review course is from January 24th through the 18th, or every Friday, 3 to 6. And I'll come with some more details later on. And then 28th is another webinar. In February, again, we'll start with a webinar. February 13th, we are planning a social networking dinner event. Most likely, it's going to be in a distillery or brewery. Even the details would be determined shortly, but the idea is that we all get together, buy our own dinner, and probably go out for a tour of the facility. Science fair, Matt is going to talk about it a bit more. On February 17th, we have the Young Engineers Award that I just talked about, and Dr. Harsh Agarwal is going to be presented and recognized. So would definitely recommend go and support him. And we are planning a mentor and mentee lunch that we started last year. So all the young professionals as well as the students would strongly encourage you folks to come and register and talk with the mentors. Most likely it's going to be in Rice Village, um, and we'll let you know the details soon. And then we'll wrap up February with a webinar from Energy Transition Institute. March, Gary is taking the lead on organizing the Deep Water Forum, and we'll have an STS dinner. Venue is going to be at University of Houston. Then we have Reach for the Stars STEM Festival at Rice University, and Matt can talk a bit more about it. And then we have the webinar. In April, again, we'll be continuing the webinar series. One of the things I'm thinking of is having these dinner meetings um, to have some kind of technology theme, and I'm thinking of ethylene technology. The workshop as well as the keynote speakers, we are working towards getting those organized, and we'll be having some student scholarship awards at that time. So that's what we have planned in the first quarter through April. And then as the months go by, we'll keep you informed of the other months. Um, Dale, you want to maybe talk about P?
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity. Every year we've been hosting a PE review class for everyone that's wanting to go for a PE. Sorry, if you can't, I'll speak up a little louder too. So we've been holding an annual class for the PE review at the University of Houston, and this year we're hosting another one. Uh, we're depending on what the enrollment is, it'll either be completely online or it'll be a hybrid class where if we get over 10 students, we're planning for a hybrid class where we'll have a class at the U of H, but you can also join online. We have a discount for PE for members of STS and for AICHE members, so please enroll. I know we've had several people go through the class and have success, and we have several people that still haven't taken the exams yet, so that they're still waiting on the right opportunities to come along. And we appreciate anybody if you got friends and colleagues that are thinking about becoming a PE. This is one of the few opportunities that get a chemical engineering PE review class. So please participate. And send it out the information. There should be a mailer going out the next couple of days again, just as a reminder about the class and registration. If you have any questions, contact either Gary or myself, and we'll be glad to fill you in. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's done. Okay, well, thank you. We have a couple of events coming up. We have a K-12 STEM outreach committee in STS, and we're in touch with a number of organizations that run events. And when that happens, we bring some judges to the science fair, and in other events, we have an exhibit table. And coming up on February 15th is going to be the Science and Engineering Fair of Houston, which is actually a regional event which covers the closest 22 counties. So that means you get a lot of good exhibits, and we need a crew. The chemical engineering, people exhibits get split among a variety of different science fair categories, which is why we need a crew of about a dozen judges to come and spread out and cover them. And a nice thing about that is, we have a group of people. It's fun to do. We have probably 2/3 of the people return every year for years to do this. So it is fun. And in addition, it means that you won't show up and find out you're the only judge there and you've got all this work to do. We'll get a good crew and we'll get it done and it'll be fun. And afterwards, many of our judges get together and go out to dinner. So we're looking for people on February 15th. It's going to be held at the Epicenter out in Rosenberg and Fort Bend County. You can arrive anytime between about 10:30 and 12, and it lasts till 5. And come out, and it's fun to judge, and you get to network with a group of great people from STS. And then later in the spring, we'll have the Reach for the Stars Festival, which is primarily for 6th grade and 7th grade girls, and we'll have a couple of other Boy Scout fair later on in the spring. So if you're interested, contact me or Aaron Green Calaco, and we'd be happy. Guess I don't want to lean back. We don't, we'll be happy to tell you more about the events, and if you're interested, we'll sign you up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. The next one is this one is going to be in May, the OTC conference, and we need volunteers for that. Dan is taking the lead right now, but if you volunteer, then you receive a free pass, free parking, um, goodies and junk that you can take home. Um, and by the way, you can attend technical sessions. So strongly recommend that if you have the time, at least for a day, maybe get in touch with Dan and attend the mandatory meeting when it's all said and done. So I think the deadline I've put down March. We don't know what exactly the deadline for volunteers is. Um, STS membership. Just remember to when you register for the full membership, opt in for the STS local section. And there is another option that limited members to join STS for 2 years at $25 a year, with the intent that you will ultimately join the national AICHE. Okay. Sponsorship packages, Andres, maybe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andreas Matsakos, and I wanted to say that the STS is a non-profit working to provide events at below cost to all of you, and you're enjoying one of them. Some of it compliments to our sponsor, our Ion, but also part of the membership fees. So there are two things we need to maintain and improve for this year. Is one, of course, to increase membership so that that income will come to us and provide those events. But second, we can allow and invite corporate sponsors to develop partnership interactions with us. One is, of course, this kind of a transactional sponsorship where your name, your technology, or your services, maybe even a poster, are presented during our events, and therefore you can really recruit new customers. But another one could be ways that we can tailor training programs or other services for your employees if you really cannot really satisfy those needs internally because of the critical mass needed to satisfy those programs. So that's why we call it partnerships and not sponsorships. It's more about creating mutual value. These are certainly the packages that we allow and publicize for sponsorship. There's a website. Of course, you can contact me after the meeting, and I certainly have a distribution list which I can put you in to get in contact with you, provide these opportunities. Thanks very much.
So the incoming officers this year, you all uh, have potentially voted. Doug White, he's the vice chair, and he'll be the chair next year. So Doug, if you may stand up. Miranda Gomes is the treasurer. Sarah is still holding the money purse. They haven't transitioned yet. So if you want money from Sarah, get it now. Katerina is the STS officer for Position 1 Continuing Education, and she's going to be leading us through organizing these talks and any other workshops that you can think of. Please contact her. And Lucas Wanroff in the back over there, he's the person who's put the newsletter together, put the email blast out, and getting all the QR codes working. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And then, okay, so um, the prime thing when I came in last year, basically the event cost is something that we need to keep a really good eye on to make our section financially viable. Okay, the per person cost of this event is about $40+, and you all got to register for 20. So if you think about your rate of return, you already double your money back. Okay. So in addition to that, think about the ideas that Alan discussed. Think about the contacts that you're making. What is the value of that? So as I say, in life you only need. Oh, so in life you only need a handful of good ideas for having a good, successful life. This is a place where you can come and collect those nuggets and apply them, and that will help you out, differentiate amongst your peers, and would be very satisfying because you are constantly learning something new. And that is the reason why you guys are over here. So I would strongly urge you to go and figure out ways that we can make this institution financially viable. Talk to your peers, talk to the young professionals to get them engaged. And what I would suggest is use your persuasion skills and influence skills to go and talk to your leadership team to and motivate them to sponsor our events. That would be a big help. So that's my emotional speech about taking this position and seeing where the finances are. If you really appreciate the work that the volunteers are doing, please help in whatever way you can to improve the finances of the session. Okay. The next thing is we want to go and increase mentorship. Basically, we started this program last year after Dale had done a really good survey of where all the members are located. And we had a session somewhere over here. And this year, as I mentioned before, we're going to have somewhere in the Rice Village, so please attend. The next one is marketing. As Andreas mentioned, we are going to try and raise funds, increase the number of participation. So we have an engagement committee. Doug is going to look into ways in which we can increase our participation and membership. And then SPTC. Last year, we didn't do SPTC because the finances didn't work out. We have low membership. Exhibitors and sponsors were not around, so we said we don't want to do it and lose a lot of money. This year, Bill and Doug are taking and as well as Alan, they're taking the leadership and trying to figure out how we can do it. And I think it is something that we all want. So let's help them figure out how we can put that event together. Okay, as you can see, there are a lot of volunteering positions that are open, and please contact us and help us out. All of us are working hard. For example, Katrina was texting me last night at 10:30 to get the PDH credit certificates going. So everybody is going and putting their fair share. They are stretched, and any help that we can get, everybody will appreciate. So my last slide, I was looking at I made a checklist of what all items need to be done to put on a successful show. And if you can guess how many items there are that need to be taken care of. Any idea? More. I would say the checklist that I had was somewhere around 75, and I would say I'm definitely missing a lot of items. So there are probably more than 80 to 100 items that need to be taken care of to put on a show. And Bill did a fantastic job last year doing that. So any help that we can get, I would really appreciate it. And with that, I would say thank you for coming. Thank you for your participation and have a happy new year. Thank you.
Good evening again. Okay, now we can do it. I'm happy, I'm pleased to introduce you our speaker, our keynote speaker for tonight, Mr. Yogesh Joshi, the Energy Demand Advisor in the Corporate Strategic Planning Department at ExxonMobil. He holds a degree in production engineering from the University of Mumbai, India, and a postgraduate diploma in management from UCLA. Today, he's going to discuss ExxonMobil's predictions for the future. And without further ado, please welcome Mr. Yogesh Joshi.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I was trying to find out who's the audience I'm going to talk to, and I knew a couple of folks who are part of the AICHE or STS. They said, well, few early career, mid career. It sounds very similar to the audience. When I actually came, I was a little late. I was like, yeah, that's about it. So on a serious note, there is way more experience in this room than I thought it would be, probably if we add up 1,000 years. So I don't want to be doing the mistake of preaching the choir, because you might know a lot more into few subjects in depth. What instead I plan to do is share ExxonMobil's view of future. And as I heard Alan saying, there is something about the forecast and the projections, right? You're always right till you're proven wrong. So it's possible it turns out to be very different, but we'll try and have a look and share a few bases about ExxonMobil's view of 2050. Yeah, here. This one. All right. So I actually joined this team about 6 months ago, and the first question I had in my mind, at least, I've been working with Exxon past 17 years, and I'll be honest, I did not pay a lot of focus and attention to understanding how complex this whole system is. So a few questions that came to my mind was, why do we even have a document that we publish, what we call ExxonMobil's Global Outlook? And what I learned about it is, if we look at the size and scale and the complexities of the value chain and the businesses we are involved in, any company of its scale is going to need some very consistent basis and foundational basis based on which they do the business planning and the strategy. So of course, that's one objective. Having said, as I started interacting during the conversation, I learned that there is so much more value in making this available to the academia, to the industry, to the society at large, because a way to look at it is, no one person, one institute, one industry, one company, even one nation is going to be able to understand the complexity of the energy world. So more participation, more contrasting views, and all of that does add up in terms of how do we use all that information and enrich every single version that we publish every year. So the next year's outlook is going to be so rich because of all this participation and information and the knowledge that comes through these exchanges. So that's the second objective. And the third really is about policy. A lot of you would have the first-hand experience on how important the policy and the framework around the policy is in terms of few of these technologies to be scalable and commercially viable till it reaches a scale where the market forces are able to actually sustain it, right? So from that context, this is the third application of the global outlook that I learned about, was to be able to actually share the views and thereby help shape the discussion around the policy space. Um, Not moving. No, it's frozen. Okay, all right. I'll click it. So the agenda is simple. Cocky dots there. Society's greatest challenge, as I learned about it. Global demand continues to grow, and we'll share some more details about that. The energy mix and the way it evolves are projected to be evolving over the next foreseen future. Enablers for success and the role for chemical engineers. And that last portion was the proof that I was told that is going to be a room full of a lot of early career. But okay, having said that, I understand on a cold weekday evening after dinner and drinks, you are hearing about ExxonMobil's global outlook to 2050. I can imagine the amount of energy is going to, yeah, and then I'm going to make it very engaging. I just have 100 odd graphs and a lot of numbers. So yeah, well, um, probably 15 odd pretty simple graphs we'll go through. Um, so the first slide there, and the title says, energy improves the quality of life. When I was preparing for the first time, when I actually talked about this slide, I was thinking, well, what are the ways I can personally associate? Because there is a slide, and then there is an experiential attachment with the data that we hear about. I was hearing or listening to one of the lectures, which was around the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. There are 17 of them. In 2015, they published, and the outlook is by 2030, there is expected to be a progress. So what are those objectives? Eradicate poverty, solve world's hunger, sustainable supply of drinking water, availability of healthcare, education, sanitation, sustainable cities. So there are 17 of them. And there are those few which are more towards inclusion, gender diversity. And then I try to associate with, well, how many of those 17 have a lot of dependence on one factor that we are talking about today, which is access to the energy. Let's talk about potable water. What percent of population do we think is yet to have access to that? And the way I explained that story to myself was, well, I get up in the morning, I go to my wash basin, switch on the tap, and the water starts flowing. Magic. Well, it is not, but think from a perspective who has to actually stand in a queue for 4 hours or go to the nearest well or a pond or a water source to fetch the daily need of water. For them, it's nothing short of magic. I was thinking about, I want to have my morning cup of tea. How long does it take me to actually brew? 5 minutes? The same magic. I go press few buttons. Well, I've experienced it firsthand when they had to make tea, and before they make tea, they have to fire the wood. And before the wood actually lights up and you have the tea, the room is full of smoke. But by the time you are going to enjoy the tea, you don't feel like enjoying it anymore because it just takes too long, too much effort. Well, when I was sharing this example that I generated or I listened to with few people say, well, but yeah, is it? It's not, because then it is about how many of human beings and what size of population is deprived of these very, very basic things. Um, and then you may ask, okay, well, all of these are anecdotal examples. Do you have something out of your global outlook that ExxonMobil have to be able to actually show that point? So let me help read the chart, though it's pretty intuitive there. On x-axis, it is the energy consumption per capita expressed in terms of million British thermal units per person per year. On y-axis, it plots the United Nations Human Development Index, which is basically measuring the life expectancy, education, and the income. I would rather generalize it index of well-being. And the size of those bubbles show the population, which is a relative population. What we can observe is on the far right hand side, which is dark blue, are most of the OECD countries, and OECD stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation. I'll generalize it by affluent countries, the way the developing world refers to it. And on the extreme left hand side, you would see the countries on the lighter green who have very, very limited access and consumption of that energy. So it appears to be some part of correlation in terms of how the society and the quotient of well-being is correlated with the access to energy. I can personally relate it, and again, a lot of us would have different experiences, traveled across the world. I'm sharing mine. I spent about 4 years in Singapore, which is on the extreme right top there. I now am in US and experiencing how it looks like, but for a large part of my life, I was right there in the middle bubble where India is. Today it appears in dark green, somewhere around middle, but my half-life ago, which was not far in history, it might have been even further left-hand side of the chart. And I have seen that and experienced that, and probably where I stand today, I'm also a product of that growth in terms of availability of education. How did I get into the mainstream? Was able to access the opportunities. So that's why it's pretty experiential for me. And that red line is a depiction on what do we then estimate the minimum required energy consumption to be for a general well-being. Well, if you then add up the numbers, about 2 billion people are yet to have access to clean cooking oil, about 700 million yet to have access to electricity, and about same size is living under poverty. And if you go by the definition of what does it take to uplift all this to a certain basic minimum level, that number is estimated to be around 50 million BTU. To contrast, where does the OECD world stand? Again, I'm not giving this example just because I'm from India, but we did actually categorically plot, so I have that number at the back of the mind. So there are 4 sectors largely contributing to the energy, which is your household energy needs, passenger and commercial vehicles, industry and services at large. So if you look at India as a whole across all the energy sectors, how much energy a person in India would be consuming is almost equal to what a person in OECD would consume only on 2 of that 2 demand sectors of that stack, which is household needs and commercial passenger vehicles. So if you put that in context, that's the kind of access to energy we are talking about. And probably this is the most complicated equation to solve when it comes to energy transition. Provide the access to the energy because world needs it, world deserves it to be able to actually improve the living standards. At the same time, we must address the other need, which is the climate change. So it's really balancing between those two. And if we hypothetically survey the world, what we are very likely going to be able to find is the world is more divided into either and or, depending on who you talk to. And that's really what the challenge is in terms of managing this and equation in terms of availability of energy as well as addressing the climate change. Okay, most seasoned people here, many engineers, I guess. We love numbers, so let's still delve into a few numbers there. How would the world look like by 2050? The only word that comes to my mind is dramatically different. For any industry or market, what we begin with generally is who's your consumer? For energy industry, every human being is, and that would mean the size of the population is a very, very important variable in terms of our ability to forecast and project the needs of the world. We are likely to add 2 billion people between now and 2050, and mankind has taken from eternity till 1930 to be able to hit a 2 billion number. So we are going to add 2 billion more people between now and 2050, as many we added until 1930, all the way around. And that's just a lot of people. And almost all that growth is going to come from non-OECD or the developing world, which is more obvious from the last chart too. The big two bubbles, those are going to drive a lot of that growth. Having said, population is one, and the second aspect is what is the outlook in terms of what is the productive activity that population is going to be involved in. So estimates on the GDP is the world GDP is likely to be doubled. So you have growing population involved in a lot more productive activities, and that would mean there would be a distribution of that wealth in terms of the purchase power parity that every human being would have over the near term future. Having said, the way the developed world and the developing world is going to consume that incremental available resources might be vastly different. For example, if I was in the developed world today, I would probably imagine that I would spend my incremental resources on more experiential things. I might travel more, buy better cars, build bigger homes, possible. Or in terms of the developing world, that might translate into people buying things that they did not have access to or they could not afford. And if you look into the context, that's expected to generate a lot more demand for value chains and the products. So, okay, now you'll say, fine, 2 billion more people, a lot more industrial activity. So what does it do to the energy demand? So I'll have next graph that depicts what does the energy demand expected to look like between now and 2050. Well, one thing that you will notice is energy demand only grows by 15%, given everything that we just talked about. 2 billion more people, total 10 billion people, double the industrial activity, double the GDP, 15%. And a lot of that is attributed to the efficiency. If you look at the OECD or the developed world economy, that's also expected to double in terms of GDP. But if you look at the energy consumption, that is estimated to be down by about 10%. Okay. In terms of developing world, the outlook projects that the energy demand would grow by about 25%. In total, it's about 15%. To put it in context, energy demand did grow by about 28% the first decade of the millennial, between 2000 and 2010. It grew by half of that, about 14%, between 2010 until 2013. If you look at 2040 to 2050, the outlook of ExxonMobil projects the energy demand to grow only by about 3%. And a lot of that, again, is associated with the way efficiency is going to actually play in the new technology and the solutions that might become commercially viable over a period of time. Having said, the next kind of sequence would be, okay, the drivers for consumption. And now we know your estimate or ExxonMobil's estimate of the energy demand in 2050. Where is that demand going to come from? Which sectors and which geographies? All right. So on the left-hand side, those are the sectors of the demand growth. If you look at buildings, again, a lot more people, lot more economic activity would also mean we might have a lot more buildings, both commercial and residential. Having said, the global outlook estimates the residential and commercial building energy demand to actually dip by 1%. And a lot of that would be associated with design for efficiency buildings, the new materials, the new insulation materials available, or just the more efficient way of space heating and cooling apparatus available. So a lot of that would come into play into the building sector. Something similar happening in industry. One demand sector that is expected to grow the most between now and 2050 is the power generation. And then if we look at the fundamentals, why it would actually be driving that, it would be about access to energy. If you look at the IEA data, around 2000, about 4 in 10 people were yet to have access to electricity. Society has made tremendous progress on that. By 2023, the number is about 1 out of 10 people are still to have access. But here we are only talking about access to energy, not having sufficient energy to be able to achieve quality and comfort of life. And that incremental demand, as people start consuming more electricity, is going to come at play. And there are various other factors like data centers. That's like hot topic of the town. How much energy intense the data centers are going to be? Well, I think everybody across the world is trying to develop a view about how big that's going to be. But that definitely is going to play a role in terms of the incremental electricity need. Similarly, there is a lot more focus on electrification of the industry as a whole. That's expected to bring a lot of electricity generation into play. Having said, there is a lot of discussion available in terms of non-combustion vehicles, battery electric vehicles, hybrids, fuel cells, and so on. And don't get me wrong, I think those are all essential and necessary technologies for us to progress towards where we want to be. Having said, if you look at it even today, the commercial passenger vehicle as a demand sector is marginal. And that would mean even if we mathematically assume that every single new vehicle from 2035 sold is going to be non-combustion, it's still going to take about 15 years. And even in 2050, we would see enough internal combustion vehicles on roads to keep the oil demand about 85 million barrels a day. Because it's the fact that it's the asset that you invest in, and it has a life cycle before the fleet changes over. So that's kind of the reality, even if all those solutions have to come and play the role in terms of the energy need in the passenger vehicle segment. Having said, on the right hand side, it's again, we did talk about it on a couple of previous slide. Uh, the total energy share of the developed world, which is OECD, US, Europe, and so on, is expected to dip by about 10% between now and 2050. Currently, it's about 30%. It's expected to be around 20% of the world energy consumption. So the consumption of energy and the demand for energy will shift more towards developing countries in that proportion. Okay, so far? All right. So the demand grows. We saw the sectors in which the outlook projects that the demand growth to be coming from. And the next discussion point is, well, what does the fuel mix look like in terms of the ExxonMobil's global outlook in 2050? I think the most important point here is every single source of energy remains essential. Because again, I'll take it back to the AND equation. We have an obligation to provide the energy access that the world needs at the same time progressing the climate. So if you look at that from that context, and it's also possible that in forthcoming future, the technology and the scientists and the engineers will make few new fuel sources available that don't show up yet here on this chart. Having said, the ExxonMobil 2050 outlook is today forward, and that would mean we consider the technology as it exists today, the policy framework that exists today, the economic realities that exist today. Of course, we do take into consideration a near-term anticipated progress on few of those aspects to be able to project, but it's basically today forward. While we will have a lot of those outlooks or data points about projections of 2050 and the future, which might actually have it work the other way around, so that you have an endpoint in mind, like net zero, like below 2 degrees C, and both actually would converge, and I'll have that view on a later slide. But on this slide, few points to note is the outlook projects that the coal consumption does go down dramatically between now and 2050. Coal consumption did peak about mid of the past decade, and that's expected to continue to go down. Having said, it still remains part of the mix. If you look at the top side there, which is the purple color, both solar and wind being large part of that renewable would grow by about 4 times between now and 2050. That's what the global outlook projects. When it comes to electricity generation, it might be even 5 or a little more than 5 times, factoring the efficiency and distribution losses and so on. So it's a phenomenal growth. And on my next slide, I'll share a few of the assumptions in terms of the growth in terms of each fuel type. Coming back to the red and the green color, even in 2050, the outlook projects that the oil and gas would remain very essential part if we have to supply the needs. And to be precise on the numbers here, it's about 54% of 2050 fuel mix. Having said that, friends, families, colleagues often ask me, no, I don't like a color. Imagine that Yogesh don't like a color. Okay, Yogesh, no problem. Choose a color to replace it with. It must be commercially viable, affordable, technically feasible, societally acceptable. If you find the color, fill it. And often it's way more complicated than it appears to be able to do that. And that's the real challenge. So here's a different view of the similar chart. What is interesting probably is to look at the compounded annual growth factored in terms of the global outlook. Solar and wind is probably the center of that growth, 6%. 6% CAGR over 25 years consistently is something that is very exciting growth. And as the base grows, it's incrementally challenging, like anything else that starts with a small base and grows at a 6.5% CAGR. Having said, uh, oil and gas is projected in the demand outlook of ExxonMobil to be like flattish. Okay. When we show this graph, one of the questions that pops up at mind is, okay, then what is this all investment in oil and gas business about? Why do you have to keep on investing in this business? Why is world investing in oil and gas business? I think fair question. And I'll be very honest. Until very recent, I had exactly same question in my mind. Well, it's flat demand, not growing. Why would you put a large capital into that business? So before I go into the chart, there are a few abbreviations I must explain. The dark black line there estimates ExxonMobil's view of oil demand to 2050, which essentially remains flat around 100 million barrel a day. There are third-party projections which are even more aggressive than that, goes up to 120, 125 million barrel a day. When it comes to those abbreviations, IEA steps, International Energy Agency, stated energy policies, stated energy policy scenarios. So IEA actually comes up with the policy framework as it exists today, and they have a projection of future where that would look like in terms of the oil demand. Then we have IEA net zero NZE, which is a net zero scenario, and that is the difference I was explaining on a slide previous, that those are the models based on an endpoint in mind, actually calculated back on how the world needs to look like, while the ExxonMobil outlook is today forward. So dark green color there assumes that there is no investment, not any kind of investment. And that is expected to deplete the supply of oil by about 15%. 15% over 100, 15 million barrel a day. And that's a lot of oil to go out of the market to cause enough shock waves into the market. If that rate had to continue all the way until 2030, that is expected, that scenario is expected to even go below the most aggressive outlook or the projection of the future, even well below IEA net zero. Because oil, and again, a lot more experience here, but we all know, I think, oil is the depletion business, so is gas. Every barrel extracted today out of the ground is one barrel less tomorrow unless you invest in it. Okay, and the economic consequence and the societal consequence of that can be dire. We have a living memory of 70s oil shock. I was yet to be born, so I have no clue about it. I've heard about it, the stories. But yeah, when I read about it, it was actually pretty dramatic event that caused a lot of ripple effects. But I also was reading about it that the oil prices went about 200%. 15% depletion year on year may take it for 500%. And that's something which the society at large would have a very dire consequence of not having that access and availability of the energy. So the second point is, well, no new holes drilled. Invest in keeping up the assets. Okay, keep it below the ground, as they said. Even in that scenario, the oil supply is expected to deplete by about 4% every year, which is still below most of the aggressive projections by any credible third party. And that would mean if we have to provide energy access affordably to the society's needs, there needs to be investment in keeping that supply as it is needed to be. And if you look at gas, it will look very similar. Coming to emissions, uh, so the global outlook estimates that the emissions from use of energy would go down by about 25% between now and 2050. Having said, if you look at where IEA steps, which I actually talked about the abbreviation, when they consider all the policies as they exist today and look at that projection, 2050 outlook is very close to where IEA step scenario takes us. So in fact, the outlook is just a little lower. Having said, I believe there is a tremendous appreciation that there are multiple ways this path of energy transition is going to actually realize. So if you look at IPCC, that stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they have issued about 1,200 different scenarios in which it possibly can happen. And that actually underpins that it's so complex and so difficult to have any kind of projection that, as I said, any projection is going to be right till it's going to be wrong eventually. But if you look at one good news, all the trends are in the same direction. So there's no contrast on the opinion in terms of energy consumption, the emissions. Those are 311 shaded lines there, which are different scenarios. So the gap between the outlook and any of those scenarios suggests that, yes, we are making a lot of progress in terms of emissions, but a lot more is still needed. Another point here is in this transition, we are probably going to need any and every solution that is commercially viable, scalable, workable, whether it is solar and wind, whether it is carbon capture, whether it is making the current energy systems way more efficient in terms of how does that energy work for us way more efficiently than it has. So all of those solutions are going to be necessary in terms of we walking that goal towards emission. Okay, as I said, one of the objectives is to be able to have a view which is complex and difficult, but also to be able to actually share that view and have it tested against and compare and contrast against how does any credible source of that data and knowledge look at it. So if we compare three things rather principally here, ExxonMobil's outlook to 2050, International Energy Agency's steps scenario, and IPCC likely below 2 degrees C scenario, what we might be able to observe is, excuse me, I'm sorry, that we are not way far where the other two scenarios appear to be. If we look at renewables, the outlook in 2050 projects the role of renewables to be about 15%. The step scenario is about 20%, and the average of IPCC, those 1200 scenarios, is about 30%. Okay, somewhere between 15 and 30. And if you look at the numbers on the rightmost side, those are the various scenario, low and high. Anything between 9 and 60. Well, that's too wide range for any practical application of that range. Um, and that's again an indication that there are multiple possible ways that this is going to be evolving. Having said, when you come to the oil and gas, 2023 is about 56% of the mix. Outlook estimates that to be about 54% of the mix, while the lowest scenario depicted here is still about 38%. So oil and gas is probably one of those sources of fuel which are energy dense, accessible, available. There exists an infrastructure, and that's the kind of compare and contrast I was talking about when it comes to having a view of future and being able to share and compare contrast against how the world looks at it. Okay, probably my last slide. Three factors in terms of the energy transition that have a tremendous role to play. First is, of course, the technology. Commercially viable, scalable, realistic, available technology. And I was talking to somebody this afternoon. There are technologies that have been available for a good part of last century, and you would notice that they have not scaled up. And the one way of looking at it is it might not have fit on one of these aspects. Um, I will talk about a few examples after the slide. But the second is policy, and we already touched about it in one of the previous slides, that there are technologies available. On the contrary of the first example, there are technologies available. It's just that these technologies may need a lot of policy support till they are commercially viable, and then the market forces kind of drive the commercialization of those. And the third is around the public sentiment that actually have to do with the way these solutions are acceptable to the market, or rather the consumer behavior at large, if you put it. So these three are going to be driving the way the world makes that transition. With that, I think this was my last slide. Again, as I said, I'll try and answer every single question, but there is a lot of knowledge, so I wouldn't like to call it a Q&A. I would rather basically say it's good to have a discussion where we'll have a lot of collective knowledge to be shared. Thank you. Start.
Okay, so based on the actual figures from 2023 and the projections, oil and gas seems to be transitioning to nothing because it's kind of 56% of the mix to 54% of the mix. That's not a transition in my view. So maybe somebody else is transitioning to something else, but oil and gas will keep doing as far as percent of the mix, pretty much what it's been doing. So I don't know what the transition. I hear a lot of that term, not only here, also in my own company, but it seems that the reality, and that's where we're actually seeing ourselves in the market, is like, as long as we have to do nothing, yes, we're transitioning. Yes, we're transitioning. So
Do you have any comments on that, or can I raise a question?
No, again, as I said,
Yeah.
mentioned the most
Yeah.
the way I think about it is, irrespective of the mix, it's still making a transition in terms of how we use that 54% to be able to achieve a lot more value and productivity is what that transition might be about. So just another way of looking at that.
Yeah, just a quick one, and thank you for sharing all this info. Very, very interesting. A quick question on the downstream side of things. When you refining and you going, all the gasoline, jet fuel, those long-term projections are going to go down, I guess, because you're going to have more electrical vehicles and all that. What's ExxonMobil view on the oil production through chemicals with, not taking out the downstream away in 100%, but if I imagine the trend of the demand of gasoline and jet fuel, that's going to go down by 2050, maybe before. Any comments on that?
Uh, and you're right. I think there is a difference between the fuel's use of energy and the chemicals use of energy, where chemicals use of energy is definitely expected to grow significantly up. And again, the very similar factors when it comes to at play. For example, when it comes to polyethylene, if you look at the large part of the population, 4, 5, 6, 7% of the total food is ever packed. And if we have to feed the population of the world, you cannot keep on growing because it consumes a lot of money, a lot of energy. And the other way of serving the need is actually being able to save from it going bad. And if you look at that packaging, demand is going to grow few folds. If you have to serve the drinking water and the milk to billions of people, is going to drive a lot more demand in terms of where those chemicals come from. Agriculture, we talked about poverty, we talked about hunger, we talked about all that chemical demand is definitely going to actually be on the rise. So I would definitely uh,
Thanks. I wanted to first answer the question to what you said earlier, because we're talking about transition, not meaning necessarily not producing oil and gas. It's how we produce the oil and gas to reduce the emissions that cause climate change. And that can change with CCS, for instance, or other ways to capture emissions. But I will also ask the question, how do you perceive those projections? These are projections, of course. As you said, there were 1,100 projections from the IEA. These are equivalent to what reminds me of the Shell scenarios. These are mental models of what could happen. None of this, what you saw today, and I say that as an opinion, I'm not speaking out of authority, none of this will happen exactly. These are all representations of what could happen. To bring it back to the room, the future belongs to the room, to the people outside the room, and the politicians who run our countries. So what we make of the future will be what this outcome will be.
Thanks for the information you presented today. Just a couple of questions. What's the economic outlook underlying those assumptions? Is it full growth, good growth, slow growth kind of models, or is it a like 2-3% growth, economic growth, or like what have you actually used in making those projections? And just one more question. And then what one big factor in there which just can throw everything off completely? If there's one or two things if you can think of that throws everything off, and other changes for a steep rise or a steep drop in those projections.
Just on the first question, I think okay. So the way we model it is based on about 113 countries, and different geographies definitely have very different assumptions in terms of that growth. So it's a kind of weighted average of the world, if you may, and that's going to be those nuances that we'll have to actually work around. Is it a forecast projection over projection, GDP itself and outlook itself is a projection, yes. But we have to start somewhere, and that somewhere is today's best view of what the future might be. Does it going to have calibration impact? Yes, it's likely to have. But then if you actually apply the elasticity of demand in terms of those individual geographies, you kind of at least are compensating for the differential growth, thereby actually adding up to the sectors very differently to stack up, right? So yes, there would be those factors that would come into the play. Your second question was, I missed it.
What's the couple of factors that change the thing out like, dramatically, like deeply out, deeply down?
Well, not that I have categoric something in mind, but if you look at it from an angle of the sense of urgency, something which is mandated by policy, whether it actually fits in the overall narrative of human development or not. Tomorrow, if there is a policy, cut down ABC, and that's going to actually have a very dramatic impact on the world energy. Having said disruption, I mean, if there is something that is a solution and a viable solution tomorrow that we don't think of today, okay, I don't have a specific example because probably that's a hypothetical scenario, but something like SMR, the modular reactors, is it reality today? No, it's not. At least not commercially viable. Would it be sometime soon? Well, future to see.
Very good presentation. I'm an optimist. In the last 25 years, world hunger, world poverty went from 48% of the population used to be poor in 2000. Today is 28%. So it's a tremendous advance in 24, 25 years on that. And poverty there is defined as a person earning less than $8 a day. That's poverty. In the United States is $25,000 a year for that instead of that. So the things that have happened is that as technology progresses and you have cheaper energy, that's the key, cheap and accessible energy. It's not just the production, it's to make it available. As that happens, people get smarter also. They get better educated. They use energy much more efficiently. So that's kind of self-bootstrapping. So that's what's going to happen to the rest of the world. They're not going to continue to use energy at the same rate. It's going to be much more efficient. So that increase may not be as dramatic as the curves show, because we're kind of looking at what we have presently. But as time goes by, the new developments, new technologies are making energy use much more efficient. We can think of ourselves, how we use energy. And that's why you show a decline in the use of energy for the developed countries. It's actually a decline in the use of energy. So that's going to be the difference. Now, the reason that, in my mind, oil and gas are going to continue to be useful is because of accessibility. It's much easier to, disperse or the oil and gas than any other source of energy. For electricity, you need tremendous infrastructure to do that. Oil and gas, you can have a can of gas and you're in a poor country and use that to do that. So that's the reason that I also think that oil and gas are going to continue to be used till the end of the century, not 2050.
Yeah, that was a good presentation there. I just have one quick question. You had on one of your early charts, you had a stacked bar of energy demand per country. And the US, between now and the future, will be going down in total energy demand as measured by quadrillion BTUs. Now, if the U.S. population is expected to go up, and the gross domestic product very likely will be going up, and if you assume that that's proportional to energy demand, I don't see the per capita consumption or the U.S. citizen 30 years from now living on less energy per capita. Right?
Uh, well, yeah, we can talk about proportions here, but the fundamental basis is the availability and accessibility of the technology in US would play much more significant role in terms of realization of efficiency in US compared to any part of the world. And that's kind of fundamental assumption. And to kind of talk about the similar topic, here is a graph that basically bridges between the incremental need of the energy and how we look at the efficiency through the global outlook. If you look at the chart between 2023 and 2050, and that would like more so for North America, a lot of that incremental demand is going to actually offset the efficiency gain.
Thank you. Very good presentation. I just have one question. Presently, crude oil is about $40 a barrel. In 2050, what do you see as a price of crude oil that can sustain your required production of the oil that you show we need, but that poor people and poor countries can afford to buy the oil? Because it's have to balance. You have to produce at a profit, but the poor countries have to buy the oil. So what do you see as the probable price in 2050 that will balance poor people's need to buy the stuff and your requirement to actually produce the stuff?
There is a reason why nowhere in global outlook there is a mention of price. and and I think because the global outlook is not about ExxonMobil's supply of oil in the market, it's just the demand of oil. And this has been the absolutely balanced commodity that the market forces are going to actually play it out. We have had shocks, and then it kind of reached an equilibrium. Uh, but there is a reason why it's not price. Uh, if you can read it, yeah, I mean it's possible that you read it. It's just that I can't read price here. Yes, thanks. Yes.
One last question.
In fact, maybe question or a statement. Right now, at this moment, 30 miles from here by air, we are throwing away flue gases at 500, 700 degrees from furnaces, power plants, and everything else. Nobody's worried about it. Why are we losing that much energy? Right now, it's happening. And it is not happening here. It's a standard around the world. We want to stay below the dew point, and we are throwing away all that energy. The second question is this light coming here, a light in the house. 70% of the energy is lost right at the power plant. 70%. Your cooling tower takes 50% and the stack 20%. We still have not improved over the last 150 years. Rankine cycle is still the same way. There's a way to take care of it, and we can recover 90% of the energy. It's so simple, but we are not looking at it. You know why? If I may allow to say, the energy companies wants to make money.
Answer. Yeah, I mean, no answer, but in general, again, I respect all those thoughts. But where I stand in life today, I think it's okay to make money. I mean, there is a reason why we are in business. so far as we are trying to address what needs to be addressed. And maybe what all you shared are the real life example. It's just that I'm too young to have experienced all that personally. But yeah, large part of that may be real, and wasteful use of resources is not new to mankind. So I would imagine that there might be some truth in that. Um, thanks for that question. Um, so
Sorry, go ahead. Be careful. You want to say something?
Okay. So all chemical engineers, I thought based on the information I had that a lot of early career chemical engineers, but again, I'll try my quiz here. Um, I'm not a chemical engineer, so if I got any terminologies wrong, but here is a riddle. There is one answer to all of this. The foundational element, which is reactant and the catalyst and the product by itself, undergoes very complicated reaction, very exothermic, consumes a lot of energy under stress, which otherwise is very balanced. One answer, one word. Morphyl. Okay, yes. Okay. Okay. Take your hand, point it at yourself. The human body, us, the human mind. I think that's the catalyst, that's the product. So take very good care of yourself. So nice to be here. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Well, we're way past our commitment of 8:30, and if you want, I can get Alan back over here so that he can present all the. But thank you very much for coming. We'll send out the details about the social event in February pretty soon, within a week's time, hopefully, and we'll keep you informed via email. So thank you. Have a safe drive back home.